The boom in apartment building has ended in an ugly bust for some property owners. 3 major residential towers have been evacuated in Sydney now. Owners and renters, the victims of a litany of catastrophic building defects. And there's evidence that they may be the tip of a very expensive iceberg, raising questions about building standards, government regulation and protection for buyers. Leading property developer Crown Group has projects underway in Sydney, Melbourne, the US and Indonesia. I spoke to founder Iwan Sunito, who believes the property market here has bottomed. Iwan Sunito, before we get into the property market as a whole, yet another story today of an apartment tower in Sydney that's had to be evacuated. The residents haven't been able to live there for 8 months. The building was completed almost 10 years ago. This is the third one. What do you think is going on in Sydney?
Well, this is actually interesting. I mean, third buildings in a short time. I think it's like there's a lot more awareness about that. There needs to be more constant and also scrutiny about the building quality, and making sure also that education of builders, developers, to make sure that the impact of building wrong buildings has a lot of impact to communities and people, especially people who live in that building there. It's concerning, and I think it's time to relook at the whole building industry, but also to educate buyers to also be cautious about who you are buying from.
Do you think that it's a heightened awareness from people in buildings that are suddenly noticing that there's cracks, that there's this, that there's that, and raising them as issues because of the Opal Towers, and it's become a big issue? Do you think without that big sensational story earlier in the year, these other problems would have been picked up?
This is actually quite extreme, isn't it, for the whole resident, or the residents are being evacuated from a building. I mean, this is quite unheard of. I mean, we heard of buildings that are cracking, significant cracks that can be rectified, but this is about buildings where the developers oftentimes, or the builders are no longer there, and sometimes we don't know who built it, who developed that anymore, and there's no capacity to actually fix the building immediately, and that really something that's quite major, and this is not the usual thing that we see. The usual thing is that buildings that are cracking more than 5 millimeters and waterproofing that's not working, and but to have building that has a fire safety issue is concerning. To have buildings that are not safe to live, it's quite concerning. It's not about, I think it's not about awareness. This is extreme, and I don't think that it's actually normal, and I think this is, as we're building more and more high-rise buildings, and there are people out there that have not done high-rise building, that are getting into high-rise development, and sometimes forced into trying to build it cheap. I mean, getting the cheapest quote possible, getting the cheapest builder, and getting the cheapest consultants to do the work. That's oftentimes they do job, but there's not enough capacity within the consultants and the builder to actually supervise or to do a job of this scale. But we have heard in the past, there's a shopping center down in the west where the buildings were just falling apart, and it is a major development in the west near Parramatta, in Auburn, for instance, where what I'm hearing is because the developer have never done a job of that scale, and they're moving into a scale of that quantity. It was not intentional, but however, I think it's an oversight of human error and lack of capacity to build of this kind of nature of building.
The government is now really being forced towards tougher regulation of the building industry. Would you welcome that? I think
it's tough enough already. I'm not sure what else can we do in terms of improving it, but I just don't know. I mean, more red tapes oftentimes is actually making building more expensive to build. Majority of our building are being built quite well, and majority of the big developers are building good quality building.
So then how do we stop, as you say, underqualified developers or inexperienced developers building really large developments that are substandard and that are costing buyers and owners huge amounts of money?
I'm not sure how to stop that one there, but I think it's a more awareness about to developers and also to buyers. I think to developers is that I think it's important that they understand that the impact for their business, for their brand, is quite long term if they're building the wrong building. I mean, I have seen developers who don't want to use their name. They simply do not want to use it because it's been associated with just wrong building.
So are you convinced that if the government goes through with some of the things that it's considering, like extending the builder's warranty period beyond 6 years, that it would, increase the level of scrutiny on those that are checking off on buildings? You think that would add cost, unnecessary cost?
It's already doing that already now. Now we have the 1 or 2% bond that we have to live in the building, and so the government has actually placed that 1 or 2% of the $200 million is actually $2 million. My only concern is that the more policy that we put in there, it becomes a legal fight because you can't stop it. Building goes wrong because oftentimes it's not intentional, as I mentioned. It's builders who is losing money. Not from that job, maybe from other job. Builders who picked up the wrong subcontractors. I mean, in time that they can't get the good subcontractors in time. I mean, there was a time during post GST in 2000, we were struggling to get any subcontractors to do our job. Simply, every one of them was building schools. The Kevin Rudd's policy time, where everybody was just going out there and building schools and to just jump up the economy. There was no intention of actually not getting the right people, but there was a struggle, and subcontractor will sign a deal and they have to deliver on time, and they're good subcontractors and they're great subcontractors oftentimes, but they use the wrong people and the job goes wrong. Now, the problem will always be there. It's more a question is, will you come back to fix it? Will you have the capacity? Will you have the financial capacity to actually fix it? And I think people are blaming the private certifier now, but private certifier does not certify all parts of the building. I mean, the engineer, structural engineer, has to certify their own work, and they have to inspect the building periodically. Now, however, if you do use cheap subcontractors and cheap consultants, and oftentimes they also use people who are not qualified, and that's where problems can actually be compounded there. I think it's a lot of education for developers that the impact is more than just their brand, but it's also about life out there, and stop building the cheapest building and just for the sake of, it's just run it well and get it right people. But it's also an education for buyers to make sure who are the builders, who are the developers, and who are the consultants that they used. Are they really second tiers or top tiers rather than small one-man band? And now every building has problem. We have to have that capacity to fix it.
Can you guarantee we won't see mass evacuations from a Crown development?
Well, I hope so. Well, I've been building for the last 20 odd years, and safety is important for us, and I'm glad, touch wood, that after 20 odd years that we have never had any safety issue. But that comes with a price. What it means that we do have auditor to come to our site inspecting to make sure that the site is safe all the time. And we do have top tiers engineers to do our job, and that's an important thing. And we have subcontractors that have worked with us for so many years. Is there a problem in the building? Oh yeah, normal problem. The toilet is blocked. Now, where's the problem? Sometimes it's not the plumber. Sometimes it's the plumber. Sometimes it's somebody else living down below that stuffed up the toilet with any kind of waste in the toilet. Despite when you said to them, by the way, to not put napkin into the toilet. So, and because the whole building was connected all together, you stuffed up one part. The whole building was blocked. But because we're there, we're an owner builder, and it's important for us to just go and fix it. Now, when you're not an owner builder, it is harder because you then go to the builder, and oftentimes it becomes a legal fight where another party will say, look, that's not my fault, it's somebody else, or the builder is not there anymore, or the subcontractors is no longer existing there. So we made a policy as a company that building quality is important for us. So we build our own team, and we make sure that it's a one-stop shop.
Moving to the property market as a whole, data from CoreLogic shows that 1 in 5 unit sales were at a loss in the March quarter. Do you expect the June quarter figures to be similar, or is the market continuing to contract, do you think?
The March quarter figure is often reflecting what's happening around December, January, February, which is a slow market of the time. And I would not be surprised if that was the case. But I think we also need to be careful about where the data has been picked up. I mean, there's been a simplified version where the whole market in Sydney is going down by 10%, for instance. But when you start analysing the whole data, that the inner city market and the inner is still strong, but areas like the Gosford area, the areas that is far away, is actually suffering from that. But also the data was taken around that December, January, March. Now, we are seeing an increase of confidence, and we are increasing our prices, and because the stocks are moving really fast, we're actually seeing every month the growth of about 20 to 30% of our sales now, which is really returning to where it used to be in the good time. And post-election, the market has been very good, very positive, and we have people constantly coming to our display unit, and we just say, what happened? It's a confident. They were concerned about the removal of negative gearing before, and they were concerned about a lot of other things, and I think the market is coming back now.
Do you think Harry Triguboff told me just after the election that he wouldn't have to discount anymore because the coalition was returned? Do you think that it is that political side and the policy side that's driving the interest from buyers, or do you think it's the lower interest rates that we're now seeing?
Everything. It's all the things that makes it up. Really, one thing is a confident post-election. Everything suddenly just everybody became positive, and I travel around the world and speak to people, and they're saying, "Wow, that's a great news." Lower interest rate does help in terms of driving the confidence of the people. But the third fundamental is really, I don't think that anyone, like good developers, needs to discount because there's no stocks in the market. 30% reduction of building activity, and that's reflection of what happened in the last few years. People were virtually either saying that the market is actually softening, but more importantly, they could not get the pre-sale, oftentimes necessary to actually build building, because the bank do require pre-sale of 100% of the funding that you get from the bank. Now, to get 100% funding of a $300 million to $500 million job would do take you about a year to 2 years in the soft time. So all of these things actually a combination of what's happening. When you look at around in Sydney, for instance, you see the exodus of all the major foreign developers in town. Simply, they just stopped building. They're not buying sites anymore in the last few years. The local developers have actually, including Crown and including everybody else, is actually haven't bought sites for the last few years. And that's a concerning, because the supply side is diminishing rapidly when you need the economy to pick up. And yes, interest rate is positive in terms of a reduction of interest rate, but it's also a sign that the economy is weakening.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask.
And we need to help to do it. You know, we need to do more than that, and just softening the interest rate.
So how long do you expect there to be this sustained interest in buying your apartments, given, I mean, the signals that we're getting from the Reserve Bank, the fact that they've cut twice and are expected to cut again, that tells you that the economy is not going great, that the outlook for employment and wages is not good.
Yes, and that's the truth, really. I mean, this is where I think the government needs to do a lot more than just dealing with the economy improvement by interest, but it's a great tool for property industry. But however, when there is 300,000 jobs are related to residential construction, and when mining is actually quite soft, retail is soft. I mean, this is an easy one to actually push, but oftentimes, you know, like government and policymaker introduce policy at the wrong time. When things are slowing down already, when China, for instance, a lot of these foreign governments are actually restricting capital flow, we then put additional restriction in terms of borrowing. And investors from foreign buyers are about 30 to 40% of our supply capacity. So when you stop this, you're losing 30%, 40% of the jobs, of the building. But that also means 30 to 40% of jobs. And I mean, the Reserve Banks, I mean, part of the annual kind of research have come, and we talk about it, and they said, what's your prediction? Look, I am reducing the number of staff that we have, because you deal with the capacity output that you can. I mean, it used to be that you were able to launch a job and sell $300 million to $385 million in one launch. Today, you do that in a year. So what do you do? What does it mean? It just means that you need to adjust your capacity to deal with the current market. The other thing is also, as a global developers like Crown Group, Sydney is not the only place where you develop. So you start to look beyond, and you're starting to look at Melbourne, Brisbane, and USA, and Indonesia, and so much so are investors from the global world. Sydney is not the only place. The moment you put restriction in terms of the capital, in terms of the borrowing capacity, or virtually not restriction, stopping that borrowing completely, and not retrospective about people who's bought before, doesn't help us, because they'll send and deploy the money elsewhere, and the impact is a reduction of the industry that is the backbone of New South Wales industry, which is the building industry. So I think there needs to be a bit more support in terms of first home buyers. There needs to be a bit more open door for the foreign buyers, because at the end of the day, not everyone is ready to buy. Some people are like me in the early day. We're not buying a home because we're building and investing into our business, and that's where our money goes to. And later on, about 15 years later, we bought our home, right? But for those people who wants to rent, for instance, you want to make sure that the supply is abundant, because otherwise it will just raise up the price. And when you raise up the price, and the vacancy is quite low also, that it just means that rental price is quite high.
The people that are still interested in purchasing, who are they? Are they local? Are they overseas? Are they owner occupiers? Are they investors? Where is the main demand coming from?
The main demand is still all of that, all of the above. The younger generation in the area that we're developing, like Waterloo, Green Square, and East Lakes, and the city. It's always the downsizers, the younger generations, the millennial, and the business people. And then you have the students who are buying now. They oftentimes now it's cash buyers, right? And then you have the global investors that are also saying that Sydney is still a good market, because in comparative term to people investing in Hong Kong, where the foreign buyers tax is like 25 to 30%, right? And then you're buying at like $40,000 per square meter. So that means a 60 square meter one bedroom unit is $2.4 million in comparison to Sydney to about $1 million. If you want to buy a two bedroom, it would be $4 million, and in Sydney is like 1.2 million. They find this is still attractive, and they do know that Sydney has got the fundamental strength of being the largest economy or major city in Australia, and it's the largest students draw card still in the whole country. And so, but we're also seeing an interesting shift of the local buyers. And when I say local buyers, they're consisted of people of Caucasian backgrounds and many of the other ethnicity within, like the Asian background. There is a growing need for people who are actually buying, for instance, in mastery job that we have, people who live in Avalon Beach, buying 2 units combined into one. And we're asking the question, why do you want to move to Waterloo from Avalon, beautiful beach, waterfront beach, home? Well, the reason is because mom is retirement place is in La Perouse, and kids are working in Alexandria. So there was this need of this mixed generation or multi-generations or intergenerational living, that everybody wants to live closer to one another. And the downsizers, one of the things that we are seeing right now that are not being met with any development right now is that 24 hours medical care in one place. And so it's a place where mom and dad that are ready to retire but really don't want to retire, or kids who don't want to send their mom and dad to retirement village because it's almost like no, they don't want it. It's just a taboo, especially in not just Asian cultures. And I think a lot of ways I have seen people who are not Asian cultures who are saying, look, I'm not sending mom and dad to retirement village because they're going to go down very rapidly, and I can afford it, kind of thing. And but they need this place where security, shopping, and medical care is paramount for them, for their need. And that's what I think the market is going to shift in the next 10 to 20 years.
Iwan Sunito, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.